Inside the duality of the three-dimensional world, three-dimensional intelligence, there is a duality in the duality that I wanted to specifically try and point your attention toward. And it has to do with the duality not only of things being split apparently necessarily into two parts, that everything exists, but also that men think that one is preferable. Now, it is necessary that men think that one of all two choices is preferable, whereas a real explorer, a real revolutionist, treats all of that kind of information just on the surface, treats it as misinformation. It treats all information as misinformation, but treats all information as being equally useful. And I had in mind, so to speak, several examples tonight, and one is extremely subtle, and for those in Scotland, subtle. Don't send this tape to Scotland. Now that I think about it, the postage is too much, and I don't approve of men who wear skirts. Well, except this one guy I met down at the bus. Scratch all that from the tape. Here we go. In the duality of things, as I have pointed out many times, and I'm sure by now that most of you have had your own glimpses, I'm sure, that things apparently are split up in such a way that you have the dichotomy working against each other, apparently. That is, good and evil, right and wrong, true and false. But there is a more subtle aspect of this that I have only touched on here and there, and I have never pointed out directly, much less put a name on. But this being the longest day of the year, why not? Well, I did mention it once. I think I had Kyrute mention it, and it had to do with that all words had an evil twin. Now, it's not an evil twin on the basis that one of the words is preferable to the other, any more than a real explorer is subject to believing that all things cut into two, that one of them is preferable. If that was not clear enough in my opening remark, let me say one more time, the duality within the duality I was talking about is not only does ordinary consciousness see everything, you know that by now, all you gotta do is think about it a second, you know that everything apparently perceivable by, everything apparently that exists, that can be perceived by three-dimensional consciousness, exists in a dichotomous manner. Things are either too hot or too cold. Things are either too old or too new. Things are either too liberal or too conservative. Not only that they're split into twos, but then men are made to think in their individual case, in an individual case, that one of the two is preferable. Of course, just a little exploratory thinking outside the realms of the old country's court would make you see that men would have to be, if life is as efficient as I say it is, and as you've suspected it is at times, that if life is that efficient, it would not split things up, unless indeed those involved believed that there was some purpose. And if there is some purpose, that means that one of them, one of the choices, in every situation is always preferable. Else why would you have two choices? Why would they have vanilla and chocolate unless you had people over here who just would die for chocolate and people over here who would prefer vanilla? Besides there apparently being this conflict, that things being cut up and made into territorial parts, there being frontiers, and there always apparently some kind of confrontation between the things, between words, between good and evil, true and incorrect. Besides that is this other subtle area. It's a kind of synonymous confusion. It was the reality behind the time I had Kyrute say something about all words have an evil twin brother. It was just kind of a joke because I had used that evil twin in several occasions back at the time I used it in reference to words. Having, of course, stolen the concept, I'll freely admit it, from soap operas. That every time they would seem to get thin on a plot, suddenly one of the stars has an evil twin that nobody's ever heard about, but even I couldn't resist. The evil twin, as I said, is not evil any more than, once it is seen from a more complex view, than the split, the apparent either or verbally of all things such as true and false and good and evil and up and down, that one of them per se, that one of them by itself is preferable. You cannot say that up is preferable to down unless you know what the occasion is, unless you're trying to get upstairs to get to work instead of go to the basement to the parking garage. You have to know what the circumstance, you would have to know what the perceiving instrument, that is the person, what they apparently were intending to do before you could decide that there was any validity to saying that one is preferable to the other. By themselves, neither is preferable. Now, when I say that every word has its apparently synonymously evil twin, it's not that it's evil twin, I just said that to be cute. It's a form of confusion. It helps keep things churned up, and I'm not going into an endless, even a threateningly endless stream of examples tonight, because I'm going to leave it to you as a kind of tacit excursion you can do on your own. But there's several to get you started. One is memory in the past. Life has people wired up. Of course, I'm using the English language because I'm addressing this to people in this part of life's body. But memory in the past, there are similar situations in other languages. But men use memory and the past synonymously. Now, it's more than synonymously, because I don't even know in the dictionary. I doubt it now that I say it. I seriously doubt that you would find memory as a synonym for the past. It is more subtle. But people, if you think about it a second, in the correct manner, people, you, everyone at the ordinary level, use memory and the past synonymously. That you'll refer to your memory of something, even if you don't say the word, but you refer to your memory of something, and to you that is the past. In other words, if you have to be pushed three-dimensionally wise, it would have to be in the past or you'd have no memory of it, right? Well, that's all right for ordinary people, but yes, you would have to say, yes, that's correct, but so what? And they would say, well, I'm not using it synonymously. It is that one gives birth to the other. One is a prerequisite of the other. Something has had to have happened and be in the past for me to have memory of it. I told you it was subtle. People treat their memory of something and the past as being interchangeable. And they are not. And they are not, apparently, at loggerheads. It's not like the same kind of dichotomous confrontation that you would have intellectually, read verbally, between right and wrong, true and false. They would seem to be, if not synonymously to ordinary intelligence, they would seem to be one being a function of the other, one being a byproduct of the other, one being a retrieval mechanism to make use of the other. Things are arranged in such a way, it is a kind of synonymous confusion that people take their memory of something as being the past. And they think of the past as being something of which they can have memory of it. If indeed they were exposed to it or had some knowledge of it, then they can have some memory of it. And if you push it, I say far enough, it's not linearly in some length, but just around the corner into a more complex dimension, you will see that you, throughout your life, have used the two synonymously, and they are not. Your memory is not what happened. It may be, or it may not be, but your memory and the past are two different things. Okay. Your memory, put down to a personal, individual level, your memory is what you have in backwards history. And what the past is free time, neither in past, nor present, nor future history. It is not limited to it. The ordinary intelligence memory is only of backwards history. And I won't say I tried to make you see several nights ago, at least I mentioned it, that there are really two distinct kinds of history, and one of them is absolutely beyond the grasp of ordinary intelligence. But there are two kinds of histories normally would be referred to as history and then perhaps destiny. There's no such things. They would seem to be complementary terms. Two different terms referring to two ends of the ordinarily linear time spectrum. And but here's what you got really, is you got forward history and you got backward history. Once you can get off the flat table of 2 dimensions, once you can get around the corner of 3 dimensions, it's not destiny, fate, the unknown, as opposed to that which is already done, that which is unchangeable, to wit, the past. History. I mean, that's the past, right? History. There's backwards history and forwards history. There's not history and then the upcoming, or destiny. I don't want to say future because you'd think that was too simple. Memory is equitable to backwards history, whereas the past is free time. The past is neither backwards history, it's neither forward history. It is indeed separate from, it is something else other than memory. No matter what your memory is, it's not that you or any person, it's not that you have faulty memory. It's not that what happened was, let's say, occurrence X, and your memory of it is occurrence X over 7. It's not that your memory of the past is incorrect. It's neither correct nor incorrect. It's 2 different things. All right, I was talking about subtleness for the Scots. There is subtleness for you. See, because if I say there is a difference between the past and one's memory, there is only one logical assumption. There's only one possible logical 3-dimensional assumption. That is that if indeed I'm pointing toward anything that is real and valid and useful, or just valid, then what I'm saying is that there is the past, that which occurred, and then there's people's memory of it, that which they remember occurred, but it can be faulty. They could have forgotten. They could have rearranged it to suit their own ends. They could have been under the influence of drugs or heat or cold. And so therefore their memory could be faulty and therefore not be actually equitable to the past. See, that's the only thing that makes any sense. That you're either talking about that memory is good and valid, or it's faulty and invalid. It doesn't matter what your memory is. See, it's that kind of duality that says that there is a purpose in duality. That if I'm pointing to something that does exist, that there's what actually happened, what I'm calling the past. I don't want to call what actually happened, I'm just calling it the past. But to accommodate those still in the mode of old country mentality, that which seemed to have happened would be one thing, and that which people remember to happen, what I was calling memory, is something else. And so all ordinary intelligence will say that I'm talking about is that your memory could either be better or worse as regards to what happened, because what happened is unchangeable, and what you or any individual may remember is changeable. And of course ordinary intelligence says, and if I say, here it goes, that's the only thing it can be. That's the only thing I can be saying. No. It doesn't matter what your memory is. See, it says that there is a quantitative difference, is all I'm saying. That there would be no difference between memory in the past if your memory absolutely coincided with what happened. Then there'd be no difference. They would indeed be synonymous. No. That's like saying, I know it's sticky, but listen a minute. That's like saying, all right, the old classic examples, that oranges could be apples if oranges were red. You can say that. You can paint them red. Or you can imagine they're red. Or you could remember that they're red. But it doesn't matter. Ordinary intelligence says that if there is a difference between the past, what I'm calling the past, and the memory, if they're not the same thing, then you're talking about the quality, the makeup, the validity, the trustworthiness of the latter, of memory, as to how it actually relates to the past. It doesn't matter how it relates to the past. It doesn't matter what you color it. It doesn't matter what you call it. It's not the same thing. An ordinary intelligence can only say, well, it is the same thing. You're saying that it may or may not coincide. It may not set up a nice mathematical Venn chart of some kind that the right things overlap. It doesn't matter how they overlap. They're not the same thing. Can anybody think of more examples? Knowledge and education. There's a great one. Can you think of any more? Maybe that's it. How about the obvious and the apparent? What about the obvious and the visible? Well, it's right there in front of you. The obvious and the self-evident, right? Pride and vanity. Same thing. I'm sure that those are listed as synonyms. How about fear and guilt? But many people say, well, I can't go out with you and do that tonight. Ah, you're just afraid. Well, I don't know. I could go do it, but last time I did that, I felt guilty. I shouldn't do that. I'm just afraid. Are they almost the same thing? Or are they not? Do people believe that they're two separate things? Do people think that they are the same thing? Do people think that they are in some way in opposition? Or do they think that one leads to the other, one causes the other? Very confusing, isn't it, now that I pointed out? That's why I call them synonymously confusing. There is, unless I come back at the end, I'm going to leave you to find some more because you're surrounded by them. And I know by now that many of you on your own have had your own glimpses enough that you can see and probably just in passing, just almost immediately, scoff, laugh, or think how cute to see the rest of the world locked into these apparent intellectual struggles about, well, the world's going in this way. And some other group calling, no, it's not, and you realize as best you can by now that neither one of those groups are really on to anything. That really amounts to nothing. But in case you begin to get bored with being so brilliant and insightful, now consider all the things that apparently are not in confrontation, not in conflict, but in fact are complementary, if not unknowingly used synonymously when they are not. But to be educated is to be intelligent. To have education is to have knowledge. I mean, there's no doubt about that. I had something else. I believe it was Kyrut I let use a term recently about chump choices, and I don't know how many of you people went to an Ivy League school and familiar with that kind of psychological specific terminology about chump choices. You know, your money or your life if you're real greedy, if you're a real tightwad. I'll give you a chump choice. One that is used continually, and the greatest example that many of you will feel some affinity for, but it goes beyond this, but is between what would appear to be the commercial world and the artistic world. And it goes like this. The example. Let's take music, a creative person. And you can fill in something besides music. You can fill in painting, writing, dancing, architecture, sketching just off for your own amusement. There is a continual throughout history duality of people attempting, saying that they are attempting, thinking that they are attempting to be involved in some creative process. And the chump choice that life offers are these two variations. that appear to be in conflict. One of them is, what's the sense in playing music? Let's take the music. What's the sense in playing music? What's the sense in even having any talent if you can't play what you want to? The artistic attitude, if not altitude, versus the commercial one. Well, what's the sense in having talent? What's the sense in playing if you can't reach the widest audience? Now, as far as those that get the most press, those that talk loud enough, get covered enough, it would seem to be, this is not important, but I'll grant you, it would seem to be that the former example in the artistic realm gets the most press, the most coverage throughout history. Those hollering, "I will not sell out," whether it be Neil Young or Prince or Madonna or Michelangelo or Titian, somebody hollering, "No, I'll paint what I want, and if you people don't like it, the hell with you. I'm going to play my music, but I am not going to compromise." What's the sense in having any talent? What's the sense in knowing how to paint, knowing how to play, if I got to worry about the marketplace? Now we can rest a second, and everybody that has any talent, any of you who have any talent at all, any interest in talent, somewhere along the line you either thought that on your own, or somewhere at an early age you read that, or you heard somebody else say it, and as soon as they said it, you went, "Yeah." You might have only been 7 or 8 years old, but that's all right. You went, "Yeah." Because perhaps your father had already seen some of your sketches, and he said, "Don't be drawing women out there clothes on." And you thought, well, what's the sense in drawing if you can't draw what you like, what you want to? And so at a very early age, you could have been anti-establishment, anti-censorship. And you could have, and then as soon as you read somewhere that Picasso or anybody somewhere had said, "Listen, if you got talent, you can't sell out. You either got to paint what you like and let the world catch up, or to hell with it." And just some little nipper could barely read. As soon as you heard that, you went, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." But, not as much coverage, but some of you probably would not have let your contemporaries know about it. You might not have ever said it out loud. But many of you should have also at least had 1 or 2 fleeting thoughts that perhaps, let's stick with music again, that you kept trying to play whatever you were playing, and you kept running across potential employers that perhaps expressed the kind of attitude that Louis Armstrong had toward bebop. They said, "That's Chinese music," which he meant as an insult at the time. Perhaps everybody you played, they went, "You play some pretty good guitar or piano or whatever, but, you had to run everybody out of here." And then someday, perhaps through the curse of having to pay the rent, or maybe just being lonely, sitting around playing your guitar in your room all by yourself, perhaps then you heard somebody say, defend selling out. That somebody's accused of selling out. Some rock musician is now taking on a sponsorship for their tours. Some architect admits that, "Yes, I designed a complete different building for General Motors up in their new New York headquarters. I'll admit that. Some people know about it. They saw the original plans, and they turned me down completely. They had already paid me $150,000 and told me to keep it, but they were not going to do that. And at first, I really worried over that. They told me if I'd make certain changes, especially on the exterior, that they would use my plans. And I thought about it, and I thought about it, and I thought, well, I can go in the closet, I can cry, and keep the advance they gave me, I can show the sketches around for the rest of my life, and I know, I've already shown them to some of my peers, and they say, "God, boy, what a deal. You are something." And so I can continue doing that, but the building never get fed up. I think I'll take on beer sponsorship. I think I'll go ahead and make the changes they want. Because what's the sense in having spent my life practicing guitar, learning how to be an architect, wanting to perform, and not have an audience? What's the point? I'm going to die, and what am I going to say when I die? 65, 70 years old with a beard, I'm going to pull my grandchildren or some little kid on the street and say, "Kid, I never sold out." And the kid looks at me and thinks, "Jesus, if I'd been you looking at you now, I think I'd have sold out a little bit." There you lay sleeping in an empty shipping crate, and they're going to have to bury you standing up naked in the ground somewhere. And so people think that. But back to, let's jump right quick and me point out that this is by no wise limited to, and not only externally, but to the arts. That kind of dichotomy, that kind of dualistic feel is in everyone. life seems to open that up. And it has to do with what would seem to be the more complex at any time and the more simplistic inside of your interest, which can change apparently from second to second. They keep repeating themselves day by day, but they can apparently be, you just never use those terms necessarily, of I want to do what I want to do. That is, I want to play my music, I want to build my building, I want to do my blank. And I've got this thought, I've got this picture, I've got this need to do it this way, and I've already played it, I've tried it on people, and they go, oh, they're not interested. But I'll be damned if I can change. A few of them say, well, if you'd change so-and-so, if you wouldn't play it so loud, if you'd, the building, if you'd paint a different color, or if you'd do your paintings where they look more like people. But if I did all that, I wouldn't enjoy it. I just know I wouldn't, so I don't know what to do. As opposed to, apparently, all right, what does the market want? What do people, do you like this? Do you like this? People go, that ain't bad. Would you change it like this? You mean like that? And they go, yeah, I like that. Really? They say yes. And you feel good about it. And you hear some other artist. It's not making it more complex. It's just to show you the merry-go-round again, the spiral. Then you may hear some other artist, painter, architect, speak out about they would not sell out. What's the sense in having talent if you can't do exactly and perform exactly as you want to? And you would think, geez, that poor little kid, he's never going to get anywhere. And you might even have just like a flying freight train going by just once or twice that it just may be like, I almost remember that I thought that one time. But I grew out of that. You've got to be realistic. Those that apparently, and that is not a continuous, unchangeable group when I say those, because one person can go through this process of at one time apparently opting for the more commercial aspect, and that is a wide range. It does not have anything to do with the artistic world's marketplace. But I'm talking about now two aspects of one's interest, and I'm just using as a springboard what seems to be the artistic attitude and the commercial attitude. But it can in one person that at one time they apparently opt for the more commercial route, and an hour later, the next day, 30 seconds later, apparently try and pursue that which would be more artistic with apparently no consideration, no thought, no worry about its commercial potential. Can any of you take it any further without me doing a lot more? Maybe I will, maybe I won't. To realize that this has much further implications than painting, architecture, music, and the commercial world, because it is simply that kind of dichotomous illusion again to believe that there's a difference between you and not you out there. In other words, there's a difference between an artist and the audience, the potential audience, whether it be an audience of those who holler, "Here, here, that is so avant-garde that no one but us likes it, and we wouldn't buy it, but we applaud what you do." That it seems to either be that or the other possibility internally that you do something and the crowd goes, "Yay, we love it, we love it. Oh, I got to have one, I got to have one. Make me a copy. I got to have one." Apparently approval on a wide scale that seems to have nothing particular to do with that which would distinguish you between you and the audience. When it reaches what I'm calling the commercial level, it is in a sense a lessening of the apparent division, the frontier between the artist and the audience. It's not that everybody in the audience says they could do it, but it's almost to feel as though if they couldn't do it, at least they're not offended by a kind of pretentiousness of the artist that this is so complex that you're going to find it offensive. You're not going to immediately be drawn to it. That is one relationship that apparently happens between an artist and the audience. But you've got to remember that there is no division. There is no real frontier. This is taking place within the human nervous system. It is manifesting and reflecting itself out there, but it's taking place inside of you. All right, I'll ask you again. If it's not taking place inside of you, then where did the thought, you might call it feeling, but where did the thought come from that you either want an audience of widespread acceptance, not just of your painting, but of you, of what you say? And widespread acceptance can just be 4 or 5 people. That may be the main constellation of your social life, these 4 or 5 people you hang around. So you may be performing on the basis of I want their widespread acceptance, or it may be on the basis, which is still just a reflection of internally, of the possibility that I'm going to do something that is so avant-garde, something that is so far outside the normal simplistic expectations that I know it will be rejected. Not necessarily out there. It may be. But it's internally, you can't take it. Internally, you find what you have just done is, hey, come off that. You know. It's Chinese music. Even though I quoted a few people on tape, even though I was quoting that philosopher, Louis Armstrong, it was not that there's anything inherently wrong with Chinese music, but those of you who may know, they use a different scale, and the most Western ears have not been prepared. He was trying to make his most obvious, I'm sure it came to him, that it's just noise. So it's not inherent in Chinese music, but since I'd used that and repeated it, I wanted you to understand that that was not the point. And for those of you who've been around long enough, you know that's not the point, because you know there is no point. Yes, there is no. There's another go around the corner a little bit aspect to what I'm talking about. Creative people have throughout the ages been inclined to say this. Now remember, creative people, we're talking about one inside of you, inside of the talking part of the human nervous system, inside of talking intelligence. We're talking about creative talking, and we're talking about business talking. We're talking about more simplistic talking, and we're talking about more complex talking. But to start with, take it any way that you can to get your hands on it. I'll make it sound like an example out here. There have been comments similar to this made throughout the ages that creative people would say regarding business people, those not similarly artistically and creatively inclined, but those that apparently have their hands on and running the marketplace. It is said that such things that businessmen are much too conservative to have much to do with the arts, that they're too timid, they will not take chances. Architects have said that historically all the way from Grecian times right up until today. We'll talk about that the people, the board of directors at General Motors, they're intelligent men, they know how to make a buck obviously and keep this company in the black, but businessmen will not take chances. Did you see those plans? It was inspiration. This is probably the flash of my life. If I'm ever going to do a building for which I'll be remembered, this is it. And I should have known it, though. I kind of suspected. They looked at it, and their feeling was that it's not that it's ugly or something, but General Motors can't have a building like that has big arms coming out in the face. What would the stockholders say? What would the people who buy our products? They would think, well, they're getting too weird. They're a bunch of retreaded hippies or they're on drugs. We can't do that. And then, of course, artists, musicians have to say about club owners, about record buyers, about print buyers, that people want something to hang up in their living room. They might pay 20 or 30 bucks. They might pay 100. But it's got to be a big old nice sunflower, and it's got to complement the color of their upholstery. It's got to be something they can look at and go, well, it ain't a real pretty sunflower, but, by God, it's a sunflower, and it kind of matches the drapes over there. That comment is not a fitting attack on, quote, businessmen. It is, in fact, unbeknownst to them, it is a statement reaffirming the necessary role that businessmen play. And businessmen, of course, we're not talking about businessmen, we're talking about something else. We're talking about an aspect of life's body, certain continuous wave-like forms of energy that move through individuals that may or may not appear to be a constant group. To say that businessmen are by nature too conservative is not any sort of useful attack. There has to be that which apparently is too conservative vis-a-vis the split that I started out on this paragraph between that which apparently is the world of commerce, the businessmen, and the world of creativity, artists. The businessmen, by their very nature, to keep this thing stable, have to appear to be, compared to those creatively inclined and wired up, have to be too conservative, not conservative, too conservative, or the frontier would not be distinguished enough. You could not tell when you stepped over the line from Yugoslavia to Albania. The line has to be too clear. There has to be guards on both sides. They have to run you through the mill. The bureaucracy has to be apparently out of control, which you know, well, now you remember, it means it's operating efficiently. It has to be real difficult to pass over this one line from Yugoslavia into Albania. There has to be apparently a very stringent line between anything for it to be operating most efficiently. In this case, I'm using an example of the artistic world, the artistic energies, and the commercial energies. So it is not a fitting, it's just an irrelevant attack to say businessmen, the world that is involved with the pursuit of money, the world that's involved with anything that is not in the pursuit, not in the support of creativity, new ideas, new thinking, new painting, new buildings, new music. Anyone so involved from the artistic view is not conservative. They are too conservative. It's all right to protect your borders, goddamn Albania, that's all right. But Jesus, I come over this every day and it takes me 3 hours every day. You put me through the same rigmarole. That is a good frontier. You people are completely out of control. You have set up a bureaucracy that is just, it's taking on a life of its own. It serves no purpose. Nay, 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 nay. It's serving the purpose. So, artiste, in you, look at the conservative side, the business side, as being too conservative, too timid, too locked to habit, afraid of anything new. Always too afraid, not just a little afraid, not just with an aversion, but a unreasonable aversion to something new. But it's not an attack. The world would not be stable, the 3D world. Individualism would not be stable were it not that from one of those two views it is always too much. Conversely, of course, the businessmen look upon artistes, the world of creation, all the way from that which seems to be necessary evils, advertising. They look upon the people, the creative minds and advertising, all the way from that to artists, to architects. Is, you know, I understand there's a difference between me. I'm not speaking as a good businessman. I know there's a difference between me and the people that think up these ads and the people that do the sketches for our billboards, the guy that did our building. I mean, I can't do it, I don't guess. I don't have time for one thing. But those people are, you know, all of them are a little wacky. I guess we got to use them. But, you know, they want to be creative, but they're too creative. I said I want a building that'll stand out. I don't want to look like AT&T's building. I don't want to look like CBS's building. But Jesus, it ain't like a building. I ask them, you know, make it to where it's different. And they go, gotcha. But they come back and it's too different. Get us a new jingle. We don't want a jingle that sounds like Ford and General Motors and Chrysler and Nissan. We want a jingle that will be different. You understand that? Agents go, we got you. And they come back and Jesus, it's too different. I said different, but not that different. What appears to be that kind of confrontation, even in places where their apparent interest overlap, such as General Motors needs a new building and an architect needs a job. The guys, the board of directors at General Motors, those who make the decision, none of them are architects, so they can't do it. The guys that can draw up plans for a building, they don't have the money to do it. People who want art, for whatever reason, who say, I want original paintings in my home, they can't do it, they got to go pay for it. But they go and they look, and most of art they find to be too arty. But those artists, those who paint, and they don't want their house, they don't want to just keep the paintings forever, they want to make a living, not only money, but they want people to buy them and go, wow, God, I love this. As soon as I can save up, I'll buy another one. But it's so hard to find those people. And I don't have the money to keep doing this all my life for free, and to go, in fact, to hand them out to people and say, here, if you like that, you can have it free, and donate it to museums. As always, you do not look on the dance floor. You cannot do it with two eyes in the three-dimensional world and see one person dancing. One force cannot make it to the dance floor. If you get real good, one force can make it to the dance floor, but it's immediately brushed off. Something happens. There's an invisible hook. There's that kind of machine like on Star Trek that just as soon as one force gets up there and starts a little dance by itself, that thing goes, whatever it is, and it disappears, which many people find to be a kind of anomaly in life, but it's really, to be more specific, for those of you who recall, it is really a systemic transient anomaly. It just comes and it goes. But other than that, other than those, you do not find one person on the dance floor. You cannot find one person. You cannot find one attitude. You cannot find an artist up dancing. If you find an artist up dancing, he's going to be dancing with a banker. He's going to be dancing with a businessman. At least within the dance I'm talking about tonight, thus far. There are other dances, of course. But on that dance, there's got to be two out on the floor. And to say that they're in conflict is very limited view. But apparently they are, right? One of them's pushing the other one around. One of them keeps going this way, and no one has to keep backing up. And once you catch on that, hey, the guy in the green suit, it's obvious that he's the one deciding what to do, and the other guy's just following him. Right? Yeah. Come on. You mean it's harder to get into Albania from Yugoslavia than it is vice versa? Well, sure, I know that. Sure, it's harder. Really? Well, sure, everybody knows that. Really? Well, all right, it's much harder to be correct than it is to be incorrect. Well, shut my mouth. I guess that proved it. Well, that's all. I finally realized it. It took me to point it out to it, and now I realize it. That's it. In the tape. We got to turn the tape over. Just because it was in the tape, and you had a second there to let your mind unwind, run off to Rio. The little Quasimodo joke I was making there at the end was one that's always got to be preferable. And the joke of me saying, well, now I even made myself realize that there has to be the superiority of one over the other. Such as the obvious, it would appear to be in the 3D world, the final place to put a period is the difference between being correct and being incorrect, and which is the hardest to do. But remember, when I start out, part of the unrecognized duality within duality is believing, thinking, which everybody's got to, that one of those two is preferable, which is just ridiculous for me to say otherwise, to even hint otherwise. That it's got to be preferable to be correct than to be incorrect. I mean, there's no doubt about it, right? There's the first flaw. The second flaw is that it's harder to be correct than to be incorrect. For those of you, I didn't pursue it because I realized how sticky it was getting a few nights back. But in addition to me, for the time being, continuing to refer to three-dimensional intelligence, old world intelligence, you can also look at it is a kind of very complex synonymous use to say that it is really a one lifetime view, because that's what ordinary intelligence is. It's the intelligence that you've got to pay retail price for. Remember the most cursed thing in the city is to holler, hear the cry out, hey, you're going to have to pay retail for this? When I had Kyrut say that, one or two of you laughed. I think you just laughed on the basis that you've had to pay retail before for carpet or something, and you've realized that it's not funny. But now that I bring it back up, then you would have to admit, right off if I ask you, you would have to admit that I surely meant something else. It's in the city, you got to pay retail. All ordinary knowledge, everything that you get from life, everything that life makes available, that the nervous system as it is can pick up, can receive through the five senses, everything that ordinary intelligence, the whole nervous system, all the senses can take in, you're having to pay retail. And when you pay retail, you're in difficulties already. Everybody's paying the same price. There's no discount. You're not getting a better deal. When you pay retail, you never know where it came from. You're not in touch with the manufacturer. It is bad news all the way around. That is the cry. that if I've got to buy retail, that is, if the information I get for the rest of my life, if I'm going to have to buy it retail, I'm in trouble. If you understand what paying retail is. If you're having to pay retail, what you're getting is real shoddy. Well, the merchandise is not going to change. It's not necessarily shoddy. I'm meaning shoddy in comparison to what you think you're looking for. In comparison to any real new extraordinary information, because you can't get it retail. And therefore, if you're paying retail, whatever it is you're getting is not what you're looking for. But, of course, it keeps things interesting. It keeps things churned up. Keeps the accounts churned and the books cooked. And it keeps everybody tap dancing. There is another aspect. Now I cleared that up from side one of the tape. There is one more little aspect for a side trip regarding businessmen and artists and etc. All over the world, at all over times, that's history forward and backwards, has been this statement having to do with statements even from all sources, particularly religions, but also philosophies, that states the difficulty of a rich man ever getting into the kingdom of the gods, ever getting into companionship with the gods. It's in all vademecums of all religions, and even people not particularly religiously inclined can hear it quoted, and all over this planet, probably all over inside of you, it's one or two guys will go, yeah. Why? Why is it so hard for a rich man to measure up to any religion? And they all say it, all of them, got some version of it, that it's almost impossible for a rich man to ever see Allah. That is, to be a real Muslim. It's almost impossible for a rich man ever to enter the kingdom of God. That is, be a Christian or a Jew. Why? Why do they say that? But how about a side trip, which may be better than the first side trip? That is, you may get a little more. Not only do they have this idea, whatever be the basis of it, whatever be the purpose of it, not only do they have the idea, then they almost immediately, after so stating, and many people in the crowd, many people in the DNA, many people in the cellular system hearing this, that is, out in the audience, many people go, hear, hear, how true. Then here and there is a rich man, maybe inside of your system, that goes, you know, piss on them. Or what? Or may just go, you know, you can't please everybody, right? If you're going to hand out criticism and attacks, somebody's going to take umbrage. And we can all guess who. So almost as soon as somebody, a priest, a minister, a spokesman of some cult or some philosophy, or some group of DNA cells in you, says it is damn near impossible for a rich man to ever enter into paradise with the gods, that is, into a more complex reality, then almost immediately those who repeat such things have this almost irrepressible inclination to say, however, this would seem to be, if I may speak for our blessed guy upstairs, this would seem to be, by and large, metaphorical. Which takes care of part of the resistance of the audience, that is, the rich man who went, what? But then, instead of getting up and leaving, then they might go, yeah. And then they can go on about, who is, in fact, a rich man? Could not a poor man be a rich man? Could not a poor man be a rich man, that he is so full of himself that he cannot understand the superiority of the gods? That is, that he cannot recognize that there are more complex possibilities in life, that our genes themselves, we got some genes that deny the possibility that other genes are more complex, or the possibility that they might indeed become more complex in the forward history of man. And so these genes go, well, that's not as bad as I thought. Plus it does not seem to offend the non-rich people that immediately went, yeah, yeah. You know, like, stick it to the rich anyway, since I ain't rich. I'm glad to hear it. Just us poor people will get more complex. that is just us simple people, that is just us simple ideas, that is just us simple energies, will get more complex. And the rich ones, that is the ones that already got it, they ain't got a chance. Ha ha, we'll get in with them. But then by saying, wait a minute, now folks, I'm sure that God meant, I'm sure that Moses or Jesus or somebody meant this metaphorically. This could not be true that just because you're rich, you can't become more complex. That is, you can't get into companionship with the gods. So, those who are hoping that the rich are going to get it, they're not all that concerned anymore, because most of them are not even sure what metaphorical means. And the rich, instead of getting up and leaving in a huff, you know, if not a limousine, say, well, wait a minute. And in that case, if it's metaphorical, then perhaps I can, you know, get into heaven, which I was going to leave anyway, because I'm sure I can get into heaven or paradise. Else why am I rich? When did the God smile upon me and made all these peons still drive around in old beat-up 49 station wagons? Right? So, it sounds as though it's metaphorical, that you can be poor and then still so full, be so rich in ignorance and biasness, and be so rich in poverty, that you're indeed a rich man. So that must be what the gods meant, that it's metaphorical. Now, of course, that helps soothe, or at least pave the way for the rich continuing to offer their support, because you can't run the rich off, right? But now, how about a side, or just a one little step there at the edge of the dance floor with that? They can call it metaphorical, and you should realize that there is validity. Well, some of you ought to be well read enough or feel it down in your own genes that what I'm saying is true, that they're continually stating right up to today that it's almost impossible or extremely difficult for a rich person to have some kind of artistic, more complex life. But the religions, of course, normally refer and point to an afterlife, that since things are not equitable here, since the rich are rich and the rest of us are just getting peed on, and it's not going to change, at least after we die, we're going to find out the rich, ha ha ha, they're going to get it. They're going to get theirs then, and all of us poor people, all of us more simple people, will be raised up and we'll be the ones rewarded. Then to say that that's metaphorical makes it almost fly. But let me tell you, from another view, it's not metaphorical, it's a fact. But you got to get past rich men and poor men, rich people and poor people. But it is a fact, because the world of rich men, which is businessmen, is not parallel to the world of artistic people. There is no parallel. A rich man, a businessman, is not the one that's going to go out and explore. He may pay for it. He may back an explorer, but he's not going. Again, you have the kind of, even I'm smart enough, I'm not going to take this too far, because I know how hard it is on some of you to have a headache in the middle of the week. But here is some more of the duality within dualities. That to say, which is known throughout the world, I repeat, that it's extremely difficult, if not impossible, for a rich man to enter into fellowship with the gods, to be rewarded after death, to be more complex. It's just stated. And then you pause and you count 1, 2, 3. And then the priest, the rabbi, the minister, the shaman, somebody somewhere, some group of cells in you, then will say, well, there is lurking under that an extremely wide and meaningful metaphorical message. All right, that's true. Because I can stand here and do it. You surely can do it. I gave you a little piece of it that you could say this is metaphorical, because it doesn't actually mean, could say the priest or the rabbi, to stay with religion. He could say, now wait, you people out there in the audience, you may be, some of you, rich. This does not mean that the gods in some way have inherent disfavor with you. No, no, no. Because a person without any great material wealth in this life could be rich in the sense that our great religion, our great founder, our great teacher, my great bundle of neurons, it says somewhere. Because a person without any material wealth could still be, quote, rich, but they could be rich by being full of untoward emotions, be rich by having excessive hatred, by having excessive greed. They could be rich in worldly interest instead of interest in the afterlife, interest in being more complex and doing better. So therefore, even poor people can be rich, and that's what was meant, that that kind of richness could keep one from doing better. I can do that. You can hear that. So that is true. That's one of it. But what appears to be the opposite, what appears to be across the border into Albania, is likewise true. That is, that ain't metaphorical at all. That's a fact. It's a fact, not just because I say so. You must know enough or listen to your own genes. Those that apparently knew something in life throughout the backward history, just your whole feel of it. When you think about somebody that would be of some kind of superior insight, intelligence, consciousness, spiritual development, any kind of old cheap term you want to think of, can you imagine, does it even strike you that if you ran across such a person, that they would truly be rich? Now, they might have gotten rich, apparently, on the spot off of some following, that they may be riding around in limousines and covered in gold, when you find out before they drug up this cult and got famous or started this religion, that they were, had been selling encyclopedias door to door and had a borrowed car. But you do not expect, you don't even think about it, is the people literally being rich. Because there is a literal three-dimensional reality to say that a rich man, rich person, it's almost impossible for them to do this. It's almost impossible for them to be interested in this. It's almost impossible that life is arranged even in a transitory, anomalous way here and there, that there'd be a kind of man wired up to be rich, to be born rich, or to have made riches on his own, and then get interested in this. Almost impossible. Those kind of odds. So it's a fact. Unless the need for some particular time and place is that it be pointed out that this is metaphorical. And when it's metaphorical, it's metaphorical. When it's not, it's not. What else do you want? It's only the rest of the world that go, wait a minute, which is it? I just told you. They say, yeah, I thought you were nuts. Of course, that's beyond nuts. That's a good thing about this. It's not just nuts. It's you just have to figure out what nuts or being wrong is, and then even ordinary intelligence would have to say, well, it hurts my head to think about it, but this is something even, this is beyond nuts, right? Not usually, yeah. You know, you got some promise. I've had correspondence and notes here from you people and some of the ones out of town again. Enough have come in that I'm going to say a comment again about what appears to be the need that many of you express, that you want to know how to control your emotions, how to change your emotions, of how much better you feel physically perhaps about being involved with this, and how you're glad I made you quit drinking, or how you're glad you quit smoking or taking dope, and I make you exercise or doing the numbers, or that how much now you get out of this intellectually, and how the way you think has changed. But many of you still want to say, but then it's so elusive. I mean, how can I change the way I feel? All right. Then those of you who are still that tied to your kind of feeling voices, then let me start off and do the kind of thing that you enjoy by picking on you. All right, you kind of people, you overlook, I've told you before, and you overlook the best basic two, and then notice you can go, oh, I knew it. I knew I probably should have known better. All right, what is it? Do it to me. It ain't me doing it to you. It's you. It ain't you. Well, we know who it is. Well, those of us who know who it is. They too, the most overlooked, I have mentioned before. To change some emotion, it doesn't matter what. To control it, to affect it. But let's just call it right now, change it. You don't keep acting like this. You don't keep feeling like this. All right, here's all you do. Is you act like a person who would act like that if they felt the way you wanted to feel. You act like a person would act that feels like you want to feel. That's not plain enough. There are times you want to act happier. Well, what you do is you act like somebody who would, you just act like it now. Don't try to be happy. Forget all that stuff. Well, it's not even worth. That's those kind of snipe hunts and those kind of chump choices that life puts on everybody in the city. Like, well, you know, you can't act happy unless you are happy. All right, you're nuts. Those people are nuts. Sure you can. Everybody knows that. It's the boss's birthday, his annual birthday party, and you've got a stomachache and your wife just left you, and you're over there standing in the corner, and suddenly, and you're about half drunk, or you had 1 or 2 drinks, and you're about to throw up, and your boss comes up and slaps you on the back. He says, I've had my own, you're having a good time, I'm glad you could make it. And you go, wow, what a party, what a party. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows that. And everybody forgets that. In the city, of course, they don't see any benefit. It's just, well, that's a kind of, well, self-evident facade of which you have to put up. Transitorily speaking. No, no, no. What you are doing is taking extant limbic voices that operate at times and making them operate when you want to. But not on the basis, you don't even have to think about it, on the basis, well, I've got to will this. I've got to think about, well, why do I feel bad? Well, all right, mainly it's because my girl just left me. But wait a minute. All right, I only got a few minutes before the boss will be here and see me acting like this. All right, I deserved it. I shouldn't feel bad. Now, she threatened. Now, she told me, God, I brought it on myself. Jesus. You people still involved with this and still trying to fly with me on this, you're not going to keep doing that, are you? You act like a person would act that actually feels the way you say you won't feel, and it doesn't matter what. And I'm just talking about for right now, for the ad hoc purpose. You do like a good actor, a professional, out in the real world, back in the city, an actor, an actress. If you say, how do you get by? How do you put up being around these businessmen and having to go to all the dinners and they're trying to dig up the angels and the backers for a new play? And I've heard you just sit around and badmouth all those fat bankers and everybody. Yeah, I know that, says the actor or the actress, but every time it's time for a new play, I'll tell you how I do it. It should be obvious. You know I'm an actor. I go there and I pretend to enjoy it. I pretend it's a part for an hour. They say we're going to have a party tonight. The producer, the director, who are going to play together, he says, we got the backers tonight. You know, I know how you feel about it. But we need you here because several of them said they specifically remember your performance and such and such, and they're dying to meet you, and they will bring their girlfriends and their children. And the person, the actor or the actress would say, some of them, if they could verbalize it this way, that, all right, I know I got to. Now, I don't worry about that. I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't care for the people. We got nothing in common. But I look at it as an hour's performance. I go and play a part of somebody who enjoys that. I mean, it's even laughed about by ordinary people. In show business, people get up and even on stage they'll make kind of jokes about, I was feeling terrible, my wife just left me, but you know, the show must go on, and they'll kind of do a small, low-level satire of themselves. That is a show business. That is a creative, artistic people. That is, I don't really feel like I'm looking. But what the hell, you paid your money, I had to come out, I got to make a living. And you can't find any use for that. It is also connected to many times over the last few months that I have mentioned between me and Monsieur Kairout, such things as in the ordinary world, in the city, the pretense of love is love. Pretense comes into this, but pretense, I mean more that you should know than the actual, the root word of that, of pretend. It is not simply pretend on the basis that I don't feel this way and I'm constantly aware of it. The pretense is tied to acting like a person would act that was feeling like you say you want to feel. The pretense has more to do with the word appearance, but in a dualistic way. The appearance is the way things are in the three-dimensional world. But appearance is also something else. Appearance is what life seems to present, that someone can say, and then she, the love of my life, appeared. Life pretended, life created the pretense that this person is your love. And as long as the pretense goes on, you're in love. You have a love affair. Internally, you're constantly being presented by life, inside the talking part of your nervous system, the pretense of, God, I'd like to do that. Geez, I wish I was rich. Wow, I wish I could get my own show. I wish a big-time gallery would do so-and-so. And then life can apparently make things appear, that is, happen in the 3D world, or not appear, which is the same thing. That I bet I'll never get a show, and sure enough, life presents you with a no-show. For 60 years you try and paint, and no one, any reputable gallery, will ever show you. You continue to write music. You are now up to 117 symphonies, and not once, not even the Buffalo Symphony, on a weekend, would agree to give a shot at this. That is the appearance. Let me ask you, since some of you, I know, well, let's assume that most of you, every time I bring up this acting or that pretense, which is, one more time, it is not a negative, it's not an attack on love or anything, but the pretense is it. But I mean even more than I'm saying now. But that which seems to be love, the reason that all things in life seems to be transitory, the reason you can't depend on love, the reason you can't depend on the truth as being stable, the reason you can't depend upon decency, the reason you can't depend on other people as being this or that, is that, now this is the reality behind my word, is because all things, love, family, relationships, beliefs, it's all pretense. That is because what you're seeing at the ordinary level, at the 3D level, is just a piece of something that not only goes around a corner. I've drawn these pictures of things going around a corner, and I draw a block. It's really more like a sphere, except the sphere is what they call it, a saddle sphere. That goes, and it goes in all kinds of directions that you can't even follow. And you're only seeing a part of it. And therefore, that's the pretense. That all the pretense of love, the pretense of friendship, that's it. If the pretense breaks down, it's gone. That is, if life drops the appearance of it, in your case, there she was. The love of my life. What I dreamed of appeared. And then later, she unappeared. That is, it went away. Internally, there is that constant pretense, but people take, without using these words again, of course, they think and they take it as being that some things are real and some things are just a pretense. And that you've got to, in some way, divine. You have got to draw your own frontiers and borders between that which may be simply pretense and that which may prove to be actually real. Come on. You want to hear the limbic system talk. You want to live in Blabber City. There it is. If not, how do you explain the fact that you can pretend to be happy and fool everybody in the world? Everybody. You can pretend to be happy, and as soon as you realize you fooled them, if you don't watch it, God damn, you fooled you. Yeah, but it ain't the same. Well, you got to remember this. Now, Kairut, I split them up, and I let them go, separate them, but you got to remember this, because he told you the truth, thanks to you-know-who. He told you when you say it ain't the same. He's told you that everything ain't the same, right? But it also went, and Kairut said, to those who can see, everything is the same. Which one are you going to believe? That kind of willful, I can call all kinds of things, throw in the adjective, revolutionist acting. That is, that you remember and you intend, you simply act like a person would act, and you know how it is. no matter what who you are wired up to think alike ordinarily, and no matter what the emotion involved is, that you want to change or that you wish that you felt differently right now, all you do is act like a person would act, and you know what it is. You don't have to look around, you don't have to think about it. You act like a person would act if they felt like you say you won't feel right now. That is, the change in the way you feel in your emotions, you act like a person would be acting if this change was possible in you. And you can do it right then, and you start doing it. It is a kind of beta level. It is a more complex level. It is a new version, a more complex version of the already existing limbic voices. You're taking what they ordinarily blabber about, you're taking the kinds of energy, you're taking the kind of neurological patterns already running in you, and you're simply putting a variation. You're improvising on it. You're turning swing into bebop. You're turning that which was more simple into that which is more complex. You're turning that which was two-dimensional into three. You're turning that which was three into four, and so on. You're going around the spherical corner of it. And it works, which is why nobody will do it. Not because of some psychological flaw, of course, but because life is not wired up for that to happen. If life wanted you to act differently, life would have you acting differently. If life wanted you to feel other than you feel, life would have you feel some other way. If that's not obvious by now, then 2 and 2 is not 4. 4. It'd be that obvious. 4. You know that. Yeah, but I forgot. No, that can happen. That can happen, but look. Act like a person who didn't forget. All right? That's all you got to do. That's it. Somebody wrote me a good question. Not that all of them are not good sometimes, but we'll end up with this. It was in reference to some things I've been talking about for the last couple of tapings about the simple always being consumed, ultimately being consumed by the complex, and I was even pointing out in my passing examples, or I did in my examples, en passant, if you recall, was pointing out that eventually you fall in and the complex is consumed by single-cell organisms. And I was pointing out for another reason and pointing in a different direction, but then somebody asked me point blank, more or less, well, isn't it that worms, being more simplistic, in this case, isn't the simplistic actually consuming the more complex? That is, that a human dies and worms, single-cell bacteria end up eating the human. Does that not contradict what I said? All right. Does everybody follow that? Yes. Yeah. Except for this. It's not the worms eating you. It's life eating you. If that pushes it too far, it's life eating you through its mouth of the planet Earth. The planet Earth is more complex than you are. But notice it is another place where the interface place, you cannot see this because, in a sense, I'm going to go ahead and say it, in a sense, the single-cell organisms, which from one view absolutely refutes what I said, that you end up, you're more complex than worms. All right. You die, as they call it, and you run out of energy. Your energy is gone on this level, and they bury you in the ground, and the worms eat you. So the more simplistic have eaten the more complex. The worms are like in an interface place that can't be seen. They're on the other side of something much more complex, of life itself. So yes, that which is more simplistic is now consuming that which is more complex. Except it is something more complex, eating something more simple. Yeah, but it can't be both ways, can it? No, and that's why we have the great world of dualism. That's what I started out admitting tonight. That, yeah, you got me again. And the person had another question that I was also referring. They said, and also, in that, you recall I was using an example of an anthropologist ending up at a place for more primitive people Much more complex. He flies there in a helicopter and he gets out and he shows them his diploma that he's an expert on them, as a matter of fact. Shows them his books and his family, and he shows them, his gold chains and his Walkman, and they're duly impressed, and they all play the radio and they look at his gold chains and they kill him and eat him. So the person asks, the person points out that inside that environment where the primitives do what they do, that is, they're living their primitive life, they're on that island, aren't they, in a sense, well, he doesn't say in a sense, or she doesn't, says, aren't the primitives being more complex than this man, the anthropologist, who comes in and thinks about what they're doing? In other words, they're naturally doing what they do, so aren't they, in a sense, he didn't say in a sense, but I'm going to throw it in, aren't they, in a sense, more complex than this guy, because they're doing what they do naturally, and he comes in and he's an outsider, and he's thinking about, theorizing about what they do. Did you follow that? Yeah, that's my answer. It's hard to do the same punchline twice, isn't it? You laugh at yeah, from one view you could say that. That's the beginning of somebody being able to begin to see, and this was not an attack on me, but to say, well, hey, I heard what you said, but you could look at it another way and say that the primitives, from one view, are more complex than this 20th century guy flying in a helicopter. Yes, that is. That you could do that. But, of course, the person was asking me to, in some way, rectify, to show them the third area, to show them the crack. We'll assume that's what they wanted. I'm sure it is. So let me point out that after I said, yeah, inside the environment of the primitive, in this case, and remember the primitive is also the more simplistic views, the more simplistic ideas, the more simplistic possibilities, the more simplistic drives in you. But, back to the example, it seems to be the primitives out there on this island, and the more complex guy that showed up and got it. And me saying that, yes, you could say that within their natural environment, them doing what they do, you could say they're more complex than he is. Now, I said that, all right? Yeah. Now the answer, the other one, is no. Is the natives, the primitive, but the natives may be superficially more suited, more positioned into what they're doing than this outsider is. That may seem to be. They may seem to be acclimated to their environs wherein he is not, that he is an outsider, the complex going into the area of the more simplistic. They may be, in a sense, in a real, workable, three-dimensional sense, more suited to, more well-positioned than this more complex creature, this anthropologist. But that does not mean that they are more complex. You have got to take it in the juxtaposition of them being wired up to do what they do where they do. There is a kind of test. If any of you are following this, it has more ramifications I'm not going to go into tonight, or maybe never again, but there is more to this that you could use. There is a test when you reach such areas as, are the worms actually more complex than the men they're eating? How can that be? Or in a sense, are not these natives who are less intelligent, less verbal, less sophisticated than this anthropologist that they killed and ate? But in a sense, aren't they more complex? Because there they are on their home ground. They got the home field advantage. They know what they're doing. They're not pretending to be anything other than what they are. And here comes this guy flying in pretending to be an expert on something that all he had was theoretical knowledge, and once he showed up, he was out of his league. And he paid for it. So in a sense, were they not more complex? No. But anytime, if you want a little test about that it appears, which it should be able, that people should be able to do this, but now that you can, at all important matters, just this fast, realize that all important matters can be looked at like this and like that. Now we all know that. So now you got to get somewhere else. But there is a test when you think, well, if there was some free time, if there was some clinical objective way, or more objective, more complex way to look at this, would there be some test? Yes. And I'll tell you what it is. I'll use the example of my anthropologist and the natives of the good island Squatoria. The test is the more complex can come and go apparently at will, whereas the simplistic can't. Did you hear that? Now you can take that as a beginning literally. The anthropologist, before he got ate, can come and go. He can fly in, bedazzle the people, get back on the helicopter and fly away. He can come back next week. He can come back 2 years from now. He can think about going back anytime he wants to, and assuming he's still got the fare to rent the helicopter, he can go back anytime he wants to. And the primitives can't. There they are. They cannot come and go. They cannot go to his environment. They can't leave theirs. The more complex you are, the easier it is, or even reach the frontier of possibility, that you can move your position, that you can change what seems to be your environs. You can apparently change the relationship between I and not I. You can go somewhere else, and the simplistic can't. Now, if you get past the idea of anthropologists externally to you and primitives external to you, look at it as being a matter of how it is related to the income and the outgo of one's own primitive intellectual activities, and the possibility that you have internally of those that are more complex, that is, the anthropologist. Look at it as being the possibility of the free movement of ideas, of energy, of being able for your more complex possibilities, the more complex aspects and possibilities of your own talking nervous system, being able to go whereas the simplistic cannot move. They are locked on an island. Their possibilities are always limited. That is why they will ultimately be consumed, or else life would be dying. Life would be self-destructing. It would be involution instead of evolution. The reason I read the question, the reason I went to this extent of answering even more than the person asked, is it does have some specific practical use. That which is more simplistic in you cannot come and go vis-a-vis that which is more complex. And it is again is why, even in the 3D world, that it smells those who religiously, politically, economically, socially, personally seem to be unassailably locked in the position of defending the status quo, defending the current fort, defending the old country, that the old things, that which has been proven and established, is the only thing worthwhile. It's the only thing worth dying for. It's the only flag to fly. We are the businessmen. We are the ones who made this world. We are the cells that made you, Bunky. And then there are those fly-by-nighties, those arty people, those dreamers, those people that want to fly around in helicopters, that want to go to new territories, that want to sail away over the horizon. But those that can sail away are the more complex, because they have the power to come and go vis-a-vis the more simplistic. The anthropologist, no matter what else we say, and he didn't have to be an anthropologist, of course, he could have been anybody, an explorer. The more complex, he had the ability, and it didn't take just a helicopter. You understand? I'm going to narrow down the physical material possibilities in 3 minutes, or else you're going to miss it. At least he had the possibility some way. If he had to swim, assuming he had the physical wherewithal, he knew how far it was from this one little island in the Society Islands to swim over from that island to the island of Squat. Whereas those guys on Squat, they didn't even know enough to know there was any more world. Even if they could swim, they never thought about it. They do not have the wherewithal. They do not have the possibility, from the motor talk to the limbic talk to the cortical talk. They do not have the language. That is, they do not have the thinking. They do not have the perspective to leave their environment. They cannot come and go. They're stuck there. You may swim there, and they may eat you. That is, the simplistic may overcome the more complex in you. What a shocking possibility. Let's banish it from our little minds. That is, do away with past history. They cannot come and go. But the more complex, no matter how dumb, no matter how stupid, no matter how untoward it may have been for the anthropologist to get there, at least he had the ability. He knew the place is over there. He had seen it. He had heard about it. And he could get over there, whether he had to swim or take a boat or take a helicopter. The same way with ideas, the same way with the possibilities in the individual nervous system. The simplistic cannot come and go. The more complex can move. It is only the more complex that has any tolerance, has any notion of freedom, has the tolerance needed for things to change inside of an individual nervous system. And yet life is arranged to where people not only confuse the simplistic with the complex, but in a single lifetime it appears that the simplistic, the more mundane, may will out in an individual lifetime. And yet everything in life, all you got to do is look. Maybe look around the corner, and you know it's not true. But in the individual life, people die believing it was futile. They die believing that they're dumber than they were when they started even. It's the grand world of dualism. Not only dualism, but believing that one of the two possibilities is preferable. Not the two possibilities they got,